I had a problem. My car was using as much oil as gas. So I had to act. I went to the car dealer nearby and he offered me a new car and everything was fine. But when I asked him what will happen to the old car, he said, "You're on your own." Of course I didn't buy the car there. But I asked myself, why doesn't he want to take in my old car? And then I thought, probably it's too much work for him to find a buyer for the broken BMW. And then I thought, broken cars, there are car recycling companies who take care of it. But if it's too much work, he probably doesn't have a digital solution for it. And being a Power Platform expert, what would it take to build such a solution? And this is what I did. So welcome to the fourth installment of the video series, how to build a digital solution with the Power Platform to help cars dealers make more sales. The business model is actually quite simple. The dealer makes photos of the old car and describes the damage and sends the information to the professional car recycling or auto auction platforms, just like insurance companies do for crash damaged cars. The recycler responds with an offer to buy the car and the dealer sells the car to the highest bidder, using the money as a down payment for the new car. In the last videos, we created the tables for customer contact, vehicle features, car transport corporations and list with car recycling companies. We also developed a SharePoint list to store the pictures. We created a model-driven app for the data entry and also a Canvas app for storing the pictures. And in this video, we will create the Power Automate flow for contacting the broken car dealers or the car recycling companies, more to say, that they can give a price quote. We start in the model-driven app, which we created in the previous videos with the table for vehicle descriptions. And here in this view, you see the make, model, color, and different columns of the description table, and we select one record. This is a record we want to modify, and to do that we go to the flow menu on the top and we see a flow called button list rows, and we click on it and this will open a pop-up menu where I can start a flow, and if I click on run, it runs the flow. And on flow run page, I will open this in a new tab to look at the flow. I click the done button and here we see there has been a flow executed and it succeeded. So I can start Power Automate flows from a model-driven app, and as we see here, when a record is selected, which was the case in our model-driven app, then the flow can start. And as you can see here, we have a number of variable initializations. We need to get the right data. Then we list rows of the table contact and we filter on the contact that we have. Then we get items from the SharePoint list, which is to get the pictures of the vehicle, like get attachments. And then in the end, we will create an email. And if you look at the email, you see that we have the data of that record we just selected, like make, model, and so on, and that we would like to have a price quote. Additionally, we see pictures from the car that we have previously taken and stored in SharePoint via our Canvas app. Most likely this has been a bit too quick for you, so we will go through the flow and how to create it in detail now. To do that, we go back to our model-driven app and on flow we say create a flow. Clicking on create a flow leads us to Power Automate, and here we can give the flow a name. I call it inform car recycler about new offer. I skip the trigger and type the trigger manually, and I say Dataverse. And here I see 3 different types of triggers for different purposes. 2 are marked as legacy, but this can be ignored. And the first type is when an action is performed or when a row is added, and another one is when a row is selected. That's the one we want to have. Now we have to type in default and select a table, and we take the table vehicle description. So we look for vehicle and we see here on top vehicle description. Now we want to create a number of variables to make it easier for us later to fill the email with values. And we go to variable, initialize variable. That's the action we need. And here first we create the variable make. This is a string variable and the value comes from the trigger, because in the trigger we have the table with the record that we selected, and one column is make, so we take this. Now we want to have another variable, so I click on add action and type in variable. Here I don't see initialize, so I have to click on see more, and then I get all actions related to variables. So you have here initialize variable, and I type in the new variable, which is model. It's a string. The content comes again from my trigger. You see model here. And now I want to make it easier for myself, so I click on copy action, and that copies the last action into the clipboard, and I can paste it again and again and again. I do this really quick here. So I have a number of variables here. What I always do is I type in the name of the variable in the action, that I don't get confused what action is for which variable. And to keep you entertained, I do this in the fast forward mode. Now that we have all the variables, I save the flow. Always a good idea to do so. And now we need an action to get the car recycling companies, the contact data, because I want to write them an email. So I type again Dataverse to get the right action. And there's an action list rows. And here I can select a table, which is the contact table, because in that contact table I have the contact data for the car recycling companies. So here I look again, contact customer car recycler, because I don't want to have all contacts, only the car recycler. So I have to filter for the car recyclers. I go back into the Power Automate flow and I see advanced parameters. So I click on show all, and here I see all the parameters I can modify. And I want to modify the filter rows parameter, and I paste in something I prepared before. And the filter statement says contact type equal, and then there's a number. And to understand that, we have to go back to the Dataverse view, to tables, and especially to the contact table. And we go into the column contact type. And here we see that we have a choice field type, data type, and the choice we have has a certain number. And for car recycler, it's this number I pasted in. So it is not looking for the label I gave it, but for the value of the choice. And the value is a unique identifier that is always the same, independent how I rename the label or change the label later on. It doesn't matter for the Power Automate flow, because it's always referring to the number. And for car recycler, it's the number 292-62001. Now I go back to my Power Automate flow. Here you see the number. The other interesting aspect is contact type. You don't just type the name, but also the technical name. And the technical name of the column contact type can be found under name in the overview of the columns, which is in this case CR07C_contact type. which is exactly why I cannot just type contact type here, but also have to have the prefix CR07C for contact type. And the filter language is so-called OData filter expression. And like equal, they have equal, greater, and other filters. So far, we collected the data of the car via the trigger and we put them into the variables. We got the list of the car recycler who we want to send an email that they can give a price quote. And now we need the images of the car. And these images we get from SharePoint. And to get the images, we would like to have the get items action. And now I have to look on the SharePoint list, which we created in the previous video. I have here entries for vehicles like vehicle 1, vehicle 2. Then we also have an ID, which is a kind of internal technical ID. And we have the attachment column where we have the photos. If I look into one of the records, we see here under attachments, we have a number of images that show the car. And this is what I want to get from SharePoint via the Power Automate flow. To get that, I have to first filter the record for the vehicle with the vehicle ID. To do so, I go back to the Power Automate flow, and for the action get items, I have to select the SharePoint site where my list is hosted. It's a M365. And then I have to select the list, and then we have vehicle images. And now I get all records from the SharePoint list, but this is not what I want. I want only one specific record. To get this one record, I have to filter with the vehicle ID. And to do so, I go to the advanced parameters and I see a number of parameters and I see filter query. And this is the parameter I want to fill. For vehicle ID, you have to know the first column that is always created in a SharePoint list has the name title. You can change it to whatever you want to, but the technical name still remains title. So the filter query I put in is title equal, and this is a copy-paste error, so I delete this, but I want to have the apostrophe, which I keep, and then I look for the vehicle ID in my trigger data. And vehicle ID we have here, and I compared to the title, which is the column for the vehicle ID in the SharePoint list, and compare it to the vehicle ID I received from the trigger, and that's the record I'm selected in the Power App. Now I want to put all the images together in one email, and to do this I need a loop. And in Power Apps, a loop is called apply to each. And apply to each, I have to select what it relates to. And I have here the get items action from SharePoint, and I apply it to body value. And then I add the next action. And what can happen is that I don't have pictures for a car. In example, we see in the SharePoint list that the ones with a paperclip, they have attachments, and the one without paperclip, they don't have an attachment. So what I need is a condition to differentiate whether a record has an attachment or not. And I select the condition action, and here I select the property has attachment is equal to true. And if it's true, I would like to do an action. If it's false, I actually don't want to do anything. Now I continue here on true, and what I want are the attachments. So I add an action, and it's a SharePoint action again, which is called get attachments. Of course, here I have to type in the site address, have to give the list name, M365 team, vehicle images, and I have to give an ID. And the ID I get from my get items. And this is the ID which we talked about earlier. Every record has a ID. So we get the attachments, but we don't get the images yet. What we need is another action to get the image content. So we say plus add action. And since we have more images, in most cases we say apply to each, and we have an apply to each for each record. And now we have an apply to each for each attachment as well. And to differentiate these both, we give them different names. So apply to each, list item, attachment. Here we take from the get attachments, the body, to iterate through all the attachments we find. And we add another action, which is the action to get the file content. and the name is get attachment content, and we see it below. To clarify things, with get attachments, I received a list of the attachment from one record, and get attachment content, that gives me the content of one particular attachment. To configure the action, we have to select the SharePoint site, the list, and now it asks for an ID. And this is the ID of the record from the SharePoint list. So if you look at the SharePoint list of one item, we have the ID column. And this is what is asked. So please give me the ID of the record. So this I get from get items. And then I need the file identifier. So I also need an ID, but I need the ID from get attachments. And this is the ID of the file attachment, not the ID of the SharePoint list record. Yeah. If you look in one record, we have this is the file ID we need. Now I want to add the file content to my array, which I created earlier. To do that, I need the action append to array. And after I selected this, select the array variable that I created earlier in the flow, bar attachment array. And here we need a JSON statement. JSON is a kind of technical language to define data structures. And first I need the name, which is the file name. And then I need the content, which is the actual file content. And it's called content bytes. The name I get from my get attachments. And I take the display name here. And I have to make a comma to separate the name from the content bytes. And content bytes, this is what I get from get attachment content, which is the attachment content. Now I have to close the curly bracket to close the statement. And now every attachment will be added to my array so that I can later at this point in time put it in one step into the email. Now we have all the data we need to create the email. So I go to add an action, and we want to send an email to each car recycler individually because they have to respond individually. So what I need is an apply to each statement, which I find here. And the base I want to iterate through is the list rows, which I created earlier in the flow. Remember, we want to send the email to the car recycler, and I want to send it to each car recycler individually because they have to reply individually. So I use the list I generated on top to go through. And now I create the email, and for that I use the Outlook connector, and the Outlook connector has a action is called send email. First I want to enter the subject, which is car offer. Then I would like to fill the body, and for that I prepared an email text, which I copy and paste in. Now I have to fill this with variable. So it's dear Mr. or Mrs. and I need the name of the car recycler now. So I go into my list rows and look for the last name. But there are so many columns, that's not so easy, so I search for it, which is much easier. Last name, boom, in. So next thing is the following car is for sale, and then I have the make, and the make variable I use here. Remember, I created a number of variables at the beginning. I have to click see more to see all the variables I created, and we have here var car make. Then the next variable is model. So I go to my variables again, paste in the model, and so on. Now I want to add the attachments, and if I look at the parameters, I see a number of parameters, but I also see attachments. So that's the one I want. So I select this, and here I have the option to hard code files, but I don't want to do this. So I click on that button, and here Power Automate gives me a data structure how to put in the attachment. And maybe this data structure looks familiar because this is exactly the data structure I created with my variable. And so we only have to paste in the variable, and then we are good to go. Of course, we need to include the email address of the car recycler, which we again take from the list rows action we created earlier, and there's the email column, and then we are finished with the flow. Let's rename the flow to make it more appealing, because what you write here will be shown in the model-driven app from early of the video, where we want to start the flow. So we call it offer car to recycler for sale. And then I click the save and go out of the editing mode. And now I go back to my model-driven app. I have to reload it to make the flow visible in the app. So I still have my record selected from the vehicle descriptions. And now I go to the flow menu, click on offer car to car recycler for sale. I run the flow, and then I can see your flow run successfully started. And to see more details, I click on flow run page. And here I see the flow is still running. And to see what is going on in detail, I click on here. And I see, okay, it got triggered. The variables have been initialized. I did the list rows. I get the picture items record, and I have the apply for each. So for each attachment, I run this condition and it's true. So we have an attachment, and then here I get the attachments for the pictures, and they are in my array. And as we see here, we are currently creating the emails. Now we are done with the emails. It took more than a minute. Each email like 6 seconds. And I see here the feedback of what happened. And to see more, I have to go into Outlook. In Outlook, we see there are already a number of emails, and the emails are still coming in. Paul McKinnon, Yvonne McKay, and I see the content, make, Honda, okay, this is bold, this is not supposed to be bold. I have to change the layout here. I also have a layout error here. There should be a carriage return. I can fix this very easily. But the bottom line is, with 3 clicks on flow and offer car to retailer, I can contact 5 car recycler, 10 car recycler, 100 car recycler without any effort. I don't have to write an email, I don't have to look up the email address, I have to do nothing except 2 or 3 clicks. This is the end of the video. In the next video I will show you how you can use Microsoft Forms, that the car recycler can give their price quote in an efficient manner, and you get your price quote automatically in your Power App and sent to the customer. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one. Bye bye.